Well, hello everyone. Hope you guys and girls are doing just well. Because when it feels like life is getting increasingly more difficult, and of course the cost of living affects us all, at least we have good movies and TV to escape to, right? So we do have a piece of good news to talk about today, but also a not so surprising bit of news if you think about it logically. I know there are many people out there that would say the Alien franchise remains dead in the water, even after the interesting, albeit slightly divisive direction that Ridley Scott took his last two films. I disagree and remain optimistic with said franchise, but when it comes to the Predator franchise, well, the 2018's installment, simply named The Predator, was a massive flop financially, as well as being universally hated by most audiences. Directed by Shane Black, an accomplished writer and director who also played Hawkins in the original masterpiece, Predator, Shane promised his new film to be an experience almost heralding back to the golden days of that no-nonsense, manly, bloody and exciting action-packed style of filmmaking that certainly dominated the 80s and 90s at least. So after recovering from the atrocity that was 2018's The Predator, I just assumed that was it, they'd given up. I mean, surely they were not going to continue with that ending. So when I heard somebody was making a smaller, almost indie-style film set in the Predator universe and taking place in the early 1700s, I didn't know whether to laugh or just for a moment consider the possibility that this might be the perfect remedy to a common problem that persists in Hollywood. Well, long story short, the film was a massive success. Maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but the review score suggested a winner-winner chicken dinner, as it received highly positive feedback from both critics and audiences alike. I enjoyed the film a lot as it stood on its own 2 feet well enough without the reliance whatsoever of any nostalgia thrown in our faces to remind us that we were watching a Predator movie. Was it the best Predator film we've ever had? I certainly don't think so. The first film remains firmly at the top for me. And the second, Predator 2, was an absolute blast full of wacky characters and a high-octane plot that replaced a dense jungle with a dense city instead. Prey was a wonderful surprise though, as it was well shot and had a simple but effective story. As I watched the film, I never felt like it was going to win any awards, and story-wise it was a bit obvious that the leading lady, of course, was always going to vanquish the Predator by the end of the movie somehow. But overall, a great effort to revitalise a franchise that seemed to have been used as Hollywood's punch bag for the last couple of decades. So let's talk about the sequel, and there will be a sequel, mark my words. With the extraordinary reception this little horror western that nobody saw coming was getting, you can bet talks were quickly being set in motion for the next instalment. The director of Prey, Dan Trachtenberg, recently spilt the beans a little by addressing plans for Prey 2 by saying exactly this. I can't really say anything about that right now, but I'll say while we were finishing the movie, we were having some really exciting conversations. The studio, myself, the writer and the producers about what crazy things we could do next. And I've never stopped. No one stopped thinking about how cool things could be going forward. Firstly, this is a great piece of acknowledgement regarding the continuation of what could be a brand new and exciting era in the Predator universe, especially if they stick to this wonderful period of the early 1700s and beyond. Prey took place in 1719 and focused on the rite of passage of a young and rebellious woman named Naru within the Comanche tribe, and ultimately her encounter with the infamous hunter from space. Whether the sequel will take place directly after the events or will allow some time to pass is unknown, but personally I would feel comfortable if they kept it within a small time frame of several years and allowed Naru to return once more stronger and wiser. This particular time in American history is without a doubt a thrilling point to throw another Predator or even Predators into the mix. By this point we've already had the invention of the steam engine in 1712, as well as many established and newly sprouting cities and settlements across the country. I've had some fun in my head imagining a showdown between the Predator and the residents of any developing city, such as New Orleans for instance. I don't know, maybe I thought of New Orleans just because of the haunting style that was Interview with the Vampire. That was a great film. But I'm visualising every western gunfight in a bar or in a street I've ever seen, and then cranking the volume up to 11 as the Predator exploits humans' lack of technology and their flimsy city construction. This, of course, is a bit of a wild speculation, as the first film solely focused on the Comanche tribe, with only a few French fur trappers thrown in for some good old gory fun. However, if we are to speculate on the encouragingly optimistic comments from the director himself, then I would assume and hope that they are planning to broaden their horizons ever so slightly. It's no secret that the native tribes of America had their land stolen from them in a very barbaric and timely fashion, to say the least. Therefore, the colonisation of America by people from many different nations happened quite rapidly. If I was a technologically advanced hunter from space jumping into the fray at this particular point in time, well, it'd probably feel like dining at an all-out buffet at the Hilton. I think we should expect to see not only tensions between native tribes and their foreign aggressors, but perhaps a predator with some interesting choices to make. Dare I say, an altruistic predator? We know that the predator species, although brutal, does have a strict code of conduct. This seems to be almost a religion for them. We have witnessed them disengage when a target has no means to defend themselves, or even take sides with prey to take down a greater threat, if you want to count the AVP movies perhaps. At the end of the second Predator film in 1990, where Danny Glover's character defeated the creature, we saw the Predator's peers, or comrades, give him a very old pistol as a sign of respect for being victorious. Maybe you can see where I'm going with this, and maybe it's kind of silly, but if there is a possibility that the Predator might, at least for a short amount of time, side with the natives, or even Naru herself if she is to return, I'm certainly not implying any kind of friendly chit-chat over tea and biscuits between the two species, of course. I'm merely suggesting what appears logical about the hunter's code they abide by, and that is to hunt the alpha or dominant presence on the battlefield. This is all assuming that we are going to see some form of conflict between the Indian tribes and the ever-expanding colonists. I mean, I could go off on a tangent about how ancient civilizations worshipped sky gods and their beliefs and practices involving such matters. I highly recommend reading anything by Graham Hancock if you have an interest in alternative history that is actually based on actual evidence. Back to the possible plot though, the film could tie in with these narratives, and therefore we might witness some sort of relationship and mutual respect between the predator and the native tribes as they fight against a common enemy, the white man perhaps. But what we can be sure of is that as soon as the studio knew they had a big hit on their hands with Prey, they must have begun writing and developing new ideas for the next chapter. Dan Trachtenberg basically told us this with his comments. It's been over a year now since the release of Prey, and one would hope that by the end of this year we should expect to hear that the sequel is getting the go-ahead, and maybe mid next year moving into full production, as well as some juicy name drops for the new cast. What I would love and expect from the sequel, regardless of plot details, which we can continue to speculate on forever, is that the film gets the cash needed for a much higher production value. The look, feel and tone of Prey was a joy to watch, it really was. So I don't have many qualms there, but I think if they are to explore different landscapes and new ground other than being restricted to the woods and open plains, they will need money and a bigger production team to make those scenes look authentic enough. So cast your memory back to when we saw the Predator fight in a subway train in the 1990s Predator 2. I thought it looked amazing at the time. So if they don't show us a good old-fashioned steam train hijacking with an obvious twist involving the hunter himself, then I'm certain the film will adapt other machines of progress into the mix, and we could get a delightfully thrilling sequel into the fantastic setup and reimagining that was Prey. So please let me know in the comments where you think this movie will lead us and when it could take place. As the Predator battles more of the natives as well as any frontiersmen who dare to invade its space, do you think the film will mostly reside in nature as did the first? Or do you think it will explore denser pockets of civilization as the demon who makes trophies of man branches out a little? The movie could go so many different routes, it's impossible to get a whiff of what they have planned just yet, but as soon as we get more news, I'll be right here to let you guys know at Entertain the Dude. Thanks very much for listening, and please take care of yourselves. See you soon.